Hello everybody and welcome back to Serious Sunday. I am your host Luke and this is the show where I talk about video games and things. This week, another chapter in the long saga of Cryengine and Crytek. And it's been a very interesting road for Crytek over the last year. 10 months ago, of course, there was the announcement of the Amazon Lumberyard engine, which basically takes the source code of Cryengine and releases the whole damn thing for free. And then in March of 2016, so basically a month later, the announcement that Cryengine 5 was also coming out with full source code for ostensibly free, a pay-what-you-want model, which we all basically know means free. Ultimately telling people that, the Cryengine, they wanted to get a lot of eyes and a lot of hands on these two engines. And at the time, I wasn't really considering all of the possible meanings behind this, aside from them wanting to see a lot more people using their engines, because up until that point, of course, the Cryengine had been sort of the premium and particularly expensive engine that people would use in lieu of Unity or Unreal. And then come Crytek's release of Cryengine 5, it was now back into the ring with the other two now fairly heavy hitters with another free engine, but it may have been just a little bit too late because according to reports as early as May of this year, so about half of the year, their employees have been missing paychecks for the first half of that, getting their paychecks late, and as late as September, not at all, apparently. So Crytek may very well be on its last legs, and that is kind of sad and scary news, because Cryengine, for better or worse, is a very robust engine that has its roots very deeply threaded throughout the video game industry. There are a lot of very high-profile games that are still being developed by the Cryengine, or using the Cryengine, I should say. So this news should be alarming to an awful lot of people, beyond just the already frightening prospect of a major company like Crytek refusing to pay its employees at all over the course of most of 2016. I had intended actually to report on this particular piece of news as much as a week ago when I had first started to hear the rumors, but I didn't necessarily want to start talking about it with unsubstantiated claims, as at the time it was mostly just news as far as I could personally tell. From a possibly disgruntled employee of Crytek, rightly so now we are aware, posting that they were not receiving their compensation on Reddit. Anonymously, of course, but I wanted to do some research because I don't like being clickbaity and I don't want to just turn this show into the rumor mill, although I do report a lot on video game industry rumors, and for all intents and purposes this is very much a rumor itself. But there have been at least enough related reports that it's becoming much harder to ignore and much harder to believe that it may just be some kind of a large coincidence. It had become such a problem, as a matter of fact, that there was even reports that an ex-artist now of Crytek has jumped ship and even started a GoFundMe campaign to ask for people to help them fund legal action against Crytek for the loss of funds. And that, despite being an ultimately sort of failing venture, is still not entirely unsurprising, because a lot of younger developers who don't really have a nest egg and much to fall back upon, quite possibly, may very well be in a very hard place, because if Crytek goes down and becomes completely bankrupt, which very much feels like it could be the case, then a lot of these developers may never see one red cent of the money that is owed to them by this multinational corporation. companies going out of business is a very scary thing, and sadly quite frequently happens in the video games industry. But to a lot of us, it just sort of comes like ripping a band-aid off. When I was laid off from Frontier, when they closed the office that I was working in, it was just a matter of somebody coming in one day and telling us that we were closing up, and that was pretty much the end of it. Not a happy situation by any right, but at least I had none of that impending dread that was one would typically find in that sort of a situation. Whereas the people of Crytek, there are many employees who haven't had the time and energy and quite possibly necessary contacts to just jump ship when things started to go south. Instead are sort of forced into the situation of knowing that the company is a sinking ship and still having to stick around there with hopes that at some point the upper management is going to manage to plug the holes and keep the company from going completely underwater, but it may be a lost cause at this point. I have my fingers crossed for Crytek, all things considered. We just don't want to see that happen to a lot of bright young engine developers out there. Now, what does it mean to you as a consumer? Well, there are a lot of high-profile games out there that are being developed with the Cryengine, not least of which being Star Citizen, which has also been subject of a lot of talk and speculation on this particular show. I wouldn't worry too much about, however, its production. It's a very good possibility that Cloud Imperium Games may actually be the silver lining in the dark cloud that is the dropping of a large number of the employees of Crytek if the company does go under, insofar as they may pick up the pieces and snatch up some of those engine developers that they so sorely need in order to continue to extend and make major changes to this engine, because from all reports the Cryengine needed an awful lot of overhaul in order to do exactly what Cloud Imperium wanted it to do for Star Citizen. So who knows, that may be one of the potential very sort of minor wins, minor positives in this whole situation. But overall, I don't think that there's going to be a lot of huge upset as far as games that are using Unreal encountering, aside from the fact that people who are using their enterprise solutions, which is official support from Crytek in doing those sorts of engine extensions and what have you, is obviously, if the company goes under, no longer going to be a viable option. But since a lot of people will already have the source code, at least people will still be able to make use of the engine and extend it as is absolutely necessary on their end. And there will be a lot of Crytek developers out there who are going to be looking for work either as an employee or a consultant. And hopefully they get snatched up by some good companies and find a much better situation for themselves. Lumberyard, I don't feel, is going to have very many problems either, as it is really spinned off into its completely own related but independent engine. It will continue to get the usage that it is getting, although I haven't heard very much of any major large-scale projects being done in Lumberyard, so I have questions as to where it's going and whether Amazon is going to continue to be supporting it, but time will only tell as far as that's concerned, and really that's neither here nor there kind of proposition in this particular case. It would certainly be a sad day to see one of the more venerable high-end video game engines going the way of the dodo, and I do think that Cryengine 5 will still have some lasting power for quite a while, but the minute an engine becomes no longer supported, and the minute that another major hardware advancement comes out that needs engine support, suddenly you just don't have the ability to continue to use that engine viably. This is a problem that we in our studio have been running into as far as Unreal 3 is concerned. It is no longer really officially supported by Epic Games. They're definitely pushing Unreal 4 as the wave of the future, and it certainly is a good engine, but we have been doing work in Unreal 3 up to this point, so we've had to make a lot of modifications on our end. through plugins and just additional code that needed to be added in order to work with certain hardware architecture that Unreal 3 didn't natively support. And now with things like Metal and better graphics processors coming up on mobile devices, it's going to be harder and harder to justify continuing to use that engine. And so I see the potential that Cryengine 5 even being, despite a new engine for all intents and purposes, really honestly necessitating a lot of developers to move away from it. Now, I know that this isn't necessarily the case for PC, as its development cycle is a little bit slower than what mobile's is right now. Mobile is sort of the big, fastest moving piece of hardware on the market at the moment, but I mean, it's not to say that PC isn't also advancing and is going to need more support over time. As a consumer, you don't see these things moving quite as quickly as they really are, but when you're working with an engine, the minute that you need access to some new technology because it's going to save you a very large portion of your memory footprint or make textures much easier to compress or anything along those lines, and if it can't be added in because the engine that you're working with is no longer supported, then either you have to do it yourself or you have to wait for the fix, which will never come. So we may very well be seeing the last generation of Cryengine made games. We'll probably still see some games being made in Lumberyard, assuming once again that Amazon does continue to push it. And I don't think that the Dunya engine is using any real support from Crytek in the further development of its engine, Dunya engine being the engine that is used to create games like Far Cry, the more recent ones, Far Cry 3 and Primal and what have you. But yes, the Cryengine is a big thing. A lot of people have been using it for a very long time, and it will be interesting to see what happens if it disappears, and there is a good chance that it's going to happen sometime in 2017, especially if a lot of their talent is dropping out of there. Even if there was a chance that they were going to be able to salvage it, when you lose the loyalty and the willingness of your employees to stick with you in a negative situation, then that's when things are really going to sort of hit the point of no return. And I worry that they probably have hit that point at this point. So this may be farewell Cryengine. I will, of course, probably pick that news up if it does happen and report it on Serious Sunday in the future. I would be very happy if my next report on Crytek and Cryengine was that somehow something happened that managed to keep it afloat, as despite the fact that I'm not a Crytek developer myself, or I should say a Cryengine developer myself, I still respect the contributions that it's made to the video games industry space and would be sad to see it go. Anyway, that's it for me for today. Some sad news, unfortunately, but let's keep our eyes and ears open, stay vigilant everybody, and let me know what you think about the whole situation down below. Thank you for watching as always. I hope that you'll join me again soon. Shows as always every day, including over the holidays. We are building up a nice little backlog that will allow us to continue to report over the week and into the new year. Until next time, however, thank you once again and take care.